We're very smart. A large security operation is underway for our partners in a rural area of the
Catholic Church and its relationship with the authorities to pursue
contract.
allegations.
Why is the Lockerbie air crash more than 30 years ago still so foggy? Let's go back to December 21, 1988, at 6:25 p.m. GMT, a Pan Am flight of Boeing 747, which is about to depart from London Heathrow Airport, England. Takeoff, the destination is to New York, the United States. Flight number PA-103, this flight is no different than usual, for the crew, it is just an ordinary mission. The plane took off smoothly, and the passengers were all talking happily. At 7:01 in the evening, the flight issued a request to the ground to cross the Atlantic. But what I didn't expect was that just after the call with the Air Traffic Control Bureau was over, the aircraft suddenly disappeared from the Air Traffic Control Bureau's radar. The staff of the Air Traffic Control Bureau kept calling for the flight, but the captain did not make any answer. After half a minute, that is, 7 hours 2 minutes and 42 seconds, the local seismological bureau reported that a 1.7 magnitude earthquake occurred in the town of Lockerbie. But this is not an earthquake, but a vibration caused by the plane's wreckage hitting the ground. None of the 259 passengers and crew members on the flight were spared, and 11 local residents were killed. And on Sherwood Crescent Square, a huge impact crater with a volume of 560 cubic meters was left, and the scene was very tragic. The Scottish authorities quickly mobilized the police and the military to the scene, and the US FBI and CIA also joined the investigation of the accident. At dawn on December 22, the Scottish police who came after hearing the news surrounded the crash site and began collecting evidence. After the high-altitude explosion, the remnants of the aircraft were scattered, which brought considerable difficulty to the evidence collection. The search personnel brought various instruments to conduct a net search of every inch of the land in this area, looking for the dead bodies of the victims and the remains of the aircraft. After hard work, the British police found the bodies of most of the victims and nearly 20,000 pieces of aircraft fragments. All these fragments were handed over to units under the British Ministry of Defence for analysis to determine the cause of the crash and provide clues for solving the case. More than 1,000 experts and technicians work in shifts day and night, using various instruments to analyze, simulate, and identify these aircraft debris. It turns out that before the crash, all parts of the aircraft were operating in good condition, and there was no sign of failure. This conclusion is expected, because PA-103 flight has undergone a flight safety inspection before takeoff, and everything is normal. Moreover, the explosion occurred suddenly and the aircraft did not have any prior warning. This basically ruled out the possibility of the aircraft crashing. Therefore, technicians believe that the air crash was caused by a violent explosion inside the aircraft. The bomb was located in the front cargo compartment of the aircraft. After the bomb was detonated, a 20-square-inch hole was exploded in the 67-meter-long fuselage of the aircraft, which quickly caused the aircraft to disintegrate. Investigators also believe that the fuselage had separated 3 seconds after the bomb exploded. The passengers and crew were thrown out. The remaining fuselage flew forward for a certain distance before falling directly from an altitude of 19,000 feet. After the air crash, the United Kingdom sent personnel to investigate. The main clue to trace the murderer was to start with the composition of the bomb. Because the aircraft has been disintegrated into rubble, only some bomb components can be found on the debris of the aircraft. It was found from the metal fragments of the plane that the ingredients of TIAN and RDX were all components of plastic explosives. Therefore, investigators determined that the terrorists used 280 to 400 grams of plastic explosives, and were equipped with electronic timing devices. The explosive is hidden in the Toshiba radio recorder. Based on the explosive composition and the tiny particles found, investigators soon found the source of the electronic timer. The CIA personnel found a Swiss producer Evan Pollia in Zurich. After interrogation, Pollia sold more than 20 such timers to a Libyan before the plane exploded. British investigators also found a blue baby suit in the fragments of the plane that also contained explosives. The children's suit was contained in a suitcase containing a bomb. By tracking the labels of children's suits, investigators found a clothing store in Malta. In August 1989, Scottish agents approached Gauss, the owner of a clothing store. Gauss recalled that 2 weeks before the crash, he sold this children's suit to a man with a Libyan accent. In addition, the Libyans bought an umbrella. After comparison by investigators, it is the same as the umbrella found in the air crash. Immediately, investigators identified the suspect, Abdullah Basit Ali Megrahi, the former security chief of Libya Arab Airlines, and his assistant Amin Khalifa Fahimi. Fahimi works at the Malta airport, and Megrahi has repeatedly used fake passports to enter Malta. The United States and the United Kingdom hold that Libya is responsible for the Lockerbie air crash and imposed sanctions on Libya, demanding that Libya hand over the suspect. But the Libyan leader Gaddafi was very tough, refused to admit that the air crash was related to Libya and refused to hand over the suspect. In 1989, the United States submitted Libya's Lockerbie air crash to the United Nations. In 1992, the United Nations imposed comprehensive sanctions on Libya on the grounds of not surrendering the killer. As a result, Libya's economy suffered a devastating blow. Libyan leader Gaddafi faced international sanctions and had to make concessions. In 1998, Gaddafi agreed to hand over the murderer and put him on trial, but demanded that the sanctions on Libya must be lifted. In addition, the interrogation of the suspect needs to be conducted in a neutral third country. In the end, Britain and the United States agreed to Gaddafi's request to interrogate the two Libyan suspects in the Hague court in the Netherlands. During the interrogation, both suspects claimed that they were not the murderers, and Fahimi was finally released. But Megrahi did not admit that it had anything to do with the crash. In the end, the court sentenced Megrahi to life imprisonment, serving at least 27 years. But in 2007, the Scottish side released Megrahi because he had prostate cancer, and he had 3 months to live. Britain's release of Megrahi was immediately met with dissatisfaction from the public. There is evidence that Britain needs Libyan oil resources. In the cooperation between the United Kingdom and Libya in the oil project, Libya made the release of Megrahi as a condition, and finally the United Kingdom released Megrahi. From the UN sanctions on Libya in 1998 until the sanctions were lifted, Libyan leader Gaddafi has never publicly acknowledged that Libya was involved in the Lockerbie air crash. But what is strange is that after the outbreak of the Iraq War in 2003, Libya took the initiative to acknowledge to the United Nations that it was responsible for the Lockerbie air crash, and would pay $2.7 billion in compensation, and each family member of the air crash would receive $10 million in compensation. Regarding Gaddafi's compensation to the family of the Lockerbie plane crash, many people do not think that Libya is the creator of the plane crash. It is believed that Gaddafi faced the pressure of the Iraq War, and tried his best to please Western countries, and was forced to make a compensation decision. But Gaddafi still failed to escape the Libyan war in 2011, and was eventually killed. More than 30 years have passed since the Lockerbie air crash, and it is still a mystery to the Lockerbie air crash. No one can tell or have evidence to show who is the real killer. On May 20, 2012, the 60-year-old former Libyan intelligence officer Megrahi, the only convicted of the Lockerbie air crash, died in Libya. Because of the famous Lockerbie plane crash. It also directly became the last straw that crushed Pan Am. On December 4, 1991, due to a large number of international routes that were unable to make ends meet for a long time, domestic routes did not improve, coupled with huge air crash compensation and the impact of the Gulf War, Pan Am finally closed down. Before his release, Megrahi once wrote a sentence in prison. He said, "I will write down the truth about the Lockerbie air disaster in a few days." But in the end Megrahi didn't keep the agreement, and he didn't make the truth public until the day he died. The key figures related to the Lockerbie air crash have all passed away, but regardless of whether the air crash has a conspiracy or a strategic purpose of a major power, any air crash targeting the lives of innocent people should be a terrorist incident. Many countries have achieved despicable goals through air crashes. History is painful, and perhaps in the face of national interests, the truth will always be trivial. That's it for today, and see you in the next episode.